Employees of Reddit, what is the most satisfying way you've caught a coworker trying to take credit for your work right in front of the boss? I spent 6 months developing a new logistics system that saved our company nearly $1 million annually. My coworker, Kevin, never even opened the file. But when the promotion for department head opened up, he suddenly became my collaborator. In the final interview with the board of directors, Kevin presented the entire system as his brainchild, claiming I only handled the data entry. He was so confident that he even added a future features slide that made no technical sense. What Kevin didn't know was that I had embedded an Easter egg in the software's source code. During the live demo, the chairman asked a specific technical question about security. Kevin started blabbering about firewalls. I stood up, walked to the laptop, and typed a hidden command. Suddenly, a giant pop-up appeared on the projector screen. It showed a time-stamped log of every single second I spent coding, contrasted with Kevin's log, which showed 0 hours. Below that, in bold red letters, it said, "Created by me, definitely not Kevin." The room went dead silent. Kevin tried to say it was a hacker, but the board had seen enough. He was escorted out 10 minutes later. I didn't just get the promotion. I got Kevin's old office, too.
What is the most delusional thing a wedding guest has ever done? I was the maid of honor for my best friend, Jen. Jen is a sweetheart, but her cousin, Sarah, is a nightmare who thinks every event is a photo shoot for her Instagram. Sarah showed up to the wedding in a dress that was so light pink it looked white in every photo. But that wasn't even the worst part. During the reception, while the DJ was announcing the first dance, Sarah literally grabbed the microphone out of his hand. She announced to the entire room that since everyone was already gathered together, she decided this was the perfect time to do her gender reveal. She then pulled out a confetti cannon and blasted blue paper all over the dance floor right before Jen and her husband could start their dance. The room went dead silent. Jen started crying, and her husband had to be held back by the groomsmen. Sarah just stood there pouting because nobody was cheering for the baby. My brother, who was the usher, literally picked her up and carried her out to the parking lot. 2 days later, Sarah sent Jen a Venmo request for $200 because the negative energy at the wedding had stressed her out. Jen blocked her, and Sarah's mom is now calling us child haters on Facebook. Professional bakers of Reddit. What is the most satisfying time you've shut down a choosing beggar or a former bully trying to get free work? I haven't spoken to Jessica in 10 years. Back in school, she made my life a living hell. Last week, she DM'd me saying she loved my work and needed a massive wedding cake for 200 people. Then she dropped the bomb. She expected it for free because it would be great exposure for my business. I decided to play along. I told her I'd love to help and that I'd deliver the cake myself as a special gift. On the day of the wedding, I showed up with a massive, beautifully decorated box. Jessica was gloating to her guests about her famous baker friend. She opened the box in front of everyone, but instead of a cake, it was just 200 individual packets of instant cake mix and a note. It said, "Since you're so good at making things for yourself, I thought you'd enjoy the DIY experience. Exposure doesn't pay my rent, but these instructions are free." I left while she was still screaming. She tried to blast me on Yelp, but I posted the screenshots of her demanding free labor. And now she's the one getting exposure.
Homeowners of Reddit, what is the most satisfying time you've dealt with an entitled neighbor who tried to extort you over shared property? My neighbor, Dave, recently installed a massive in-ground pool. Last month, he knocked on my door and told me he was replacing our shared wooden fence with a $10,000 glass partition to improve his view. Then he handed me an invoice for $5,000. I told him I liked the wood fence and had no intention of paying for his luxury upgrade. Dave turned red and told me that since it was a shared boundary, I was legally obligated to pay half. He even had his lawyer send me a threatening letter. I decided to hire a professional surveyor before responding. The results were better than I could have imagined. It turns out the original fence was already 6 inches inside my property line. Dave hadn't just replaced the fence. He had built his entire concrete pool deck 2 feet over the boundary. When we went to court, Dave was still acting smug. Until my lawyer presented the survey. The judge didn't just rule that I didn't owe him for the fence. She ordered Dave to remove the glass partition and tear up 2 feet of his brand new concrete deck at his own expense. Now Dave has a view of a brand new, extra tall wooden fence that I built exactly on the line.
Photographers of Reddit. What is the most insane influencer moment you've had to deal with while trying to do your job at a professional shoot? I was hired to shoot a high-end wedding last summer. During the couple's private golden hour portraits, a guest named Brittany, who has about 5,000 followers, kept jumping in front of my lens with her iPhone. She was literally shouting directions at the bride and blocking my shots. I asked her politely to step back, but she laughed and told me, "I'm an influencer, sweetie. My followers need to see this aesthetic and your lighting is perfect. Just work around me." Pause. I decided to stop fighting and started clicking, but I wasn't taking photos of the bride anymore. I was taking photos of Brittany in the most unflattering ways possible. Double chins, mid-chew, and awkward angles. When the gallery went live, Brittany was furious that she wasn't in any of the pretty shots. She DM'd me demanding I edit her into the wedding album. I told her I'd be happy to. For my influencer rate of $500 per photo. She tried to put me on blast, but the bride and groom actually loved the Brittany blooper reel so much they shared it with the whole family. Now, she's known to everyone as the Golden Hour Gremlin. What is the most bridezilla moment you have ever witnessed? I was a bridesmaid for my college roommate, Emily. Emily has always been a bit of a perfectionist, but her wedding turned her into a literal dictator. She sent out a 15-page style guide to every guest 3 months in advance. It didn't just have colors, it had approved fabrics, acceptable hair lengths, and even a list of forbidden perfumes that she claimed would clash with the floral arrangements. We all thought it was a joke until the day of the wedding. Emily actually hired 2 fashion police, who were just security guards she paid extra, to stand at the entrance with color swatches. My own brother was turned away at the door because his suit was charcoal when the guide specifically demanded midnight onyx. But the peak was the aisle audit. Right before Emily was supposed to walk down the aisle, she made the coordinator pause the music. She walked through the pews herself, pointing at people whose outfits she didn't like. She forced her 70-year-old uncle to take off his tie in front of everyone because it had a microscopic floral pattern that she said distracted from her silhouette. The ceremony was delayed by 45 minutes because she made 3 people go back to their cars to change. At the reception, she handed me an invoice for $250 for emotional damages because my maid of honor toast was 30 seconds longer than the approved script. I handed it back to her and left before the cake was even cut. What is the most main character behavior you have ever witnessed from a neighbor? I moved into a quiet cul-de-sac last year. My neighbor, Karen, seemed nice at first, until I came home from a weekend trip to find a full-blown birthday party happening in my own backyard. I'm talking about a professional bouncy house, a catering tent, and about 30 screaming kids, all on my lawn. When I walked up, Karen didn't even look embarrassed. She just waved and said, "Oh, you're back early. We're just finishing up. Your yard has much better sunlight for the photos than mine." I was too stunned to speak. She had used my outdoor outlets to power the bouncy house and my garden hose to fill up a massive water slide. But the kicker? She actually had the nerve to ask me to keep the noise down inside my own house because the kids were about to cut the cake and she wanted the video to be perfect. The next morning, I found a bill in my mailbox. She wasn't apologizing. She was asking me to split the cost of the professional cleaning crew she hired to restore my yard after the party. She claimed that since I benefited from the aeration the kids' feet provided to the soil, it was only fair. I sent her the footage from my Ring camera along with a quote for the dead patches in my grass. She hasn't spoken to me since, but she did post on Facebook about how unneighborly some people are.
What is the most satisfying I told you so moment you've had at work? I'm a senior project manager at a tech firm. Last year, they hired the CEO's nephew, Tyler, as my junior. Tyler was the definition of failing upward. He'd show up 2 hours late, spend all day on his phone, and then try to take credit for my team's work in meetings. 2 months ago, we were preparing a pitch for a multi-million-dollar client. I spent 3 weeks building a custom software demo. Tyler didn't contribute a single line of code. The night before the presentation, Tyler waited until I left the office, accessed the server, and moved the entire project into his personal folder, renaming it Tyler's Proposal. What Tyler didn't realize is that I'm paranoid. I had set up a kill switch in the code that required a specific encryption key stored on my hardware token. If anyone tried to run the demo without that token, it would look perfect for 5 minutes and then start displaying Shrek memes instead of data. During the meeting, Tyler jumped up before I could speak and said, "I took the initiative to handle this solo." He started the presentation, acting like a genius. 5 minutes in, just as the CEO was leaning in, the screen started flashing, "Get out of my swamp!" while Smash Mouth's All-Star played through the conference room speakers. Tyler turned bright red and started clicking frantically, but the Shrek protocol was unblockable. I calmly stood up, plugged in my token, and said, "Sorry about that. Tyler must have opened the wrong version. Let me show you the real project." We got the contract. Tyler was reassigned to the mailroom that afternoon. What is the most blatant lie someone told you that you let them keep telling until it blew up in their face? I had a coworker, Marcus, who was a pathological liar. He didn't just lie about small things. He claimed he was a secret millionaire who only worked at our mid-level marketing firm for the health insurance. For a year, he told us stories about his weekend trips to the Hamptons and his collection of vintage Ferraris. He even showed us a photo of a massive mansion, claiming it was his summer home. I recognized the house immediately. It was a famous Airbnb that my cousin had actually stayed in for her wedding. Instead of calling him out, the whole office decided to play along. We'd ask him for financial advice and listen as he gave us the most generic, nonsensical tips. The explosion happened during our annual Christmas party. Marcus had been bragging for weeks that he was going to donate $50,000 to the company's charity drive. On the night of the party, our boss called him up to the stage in front of the entire company, including the CEO. Our boss said, "Marcus, we were so inspired by your generosity that we've arranged for a local news crew to film the check presentation." Marcus turned a shade of white I didn't know was possible. He tried to claim his offshore accounts were frozen for an audit. The news crew was actually just the IT guys with a high-end camera, but Marcus didn't know that. He ended up confessing to the CEO right there that he lived in a studio apartment and took the bus to work. He resigned the next morning out of pure embarrassment. What is the most gold digger behavior you have ever seen from someone who didn't realize who they were talking to? My brother, Leo, is incredibly humble. He's a software engineer who made millions in a tech buyout, but he still drives a 10-year-old Honda and wears hoodies from Target. Last month, he started dating Tiffany. Tiffany told him she was a luxury travel influencer, but in reality, she was just maxing out credit cards to take photos in hotel lobbies. At our family dinner, Tiffany didn't realize Leo owned the restaurant we were sitting in. She spent the entire night mocking my basic jewelry and telling me I needed to marry up if I ever wanted to see the inside of a private jet. She then turned to Leo and said, "I don't think this relationship's going to work. I need a man who can actually afford to take me to the Maldives, not someone who thinks a Honda is a good car." Leo didn't even get mad. He just signaled the waiter, who also happens to be the general manager. Leo said, "Hey, Marcus, could you bring over the deed for the new penthouse? I need to sign some papers." Tiffany's face went from smug to pure shock in 3 seconds. She started stuttering about how she was just testing him and that she actually loves Hondas. Leo just smiled, paid the bill, and told her, "I think you're right, Tiffany. This relationship isn't working. I'll call you an Uber, a basic one." He blocked her before we even finished dessert. What is the fastest you've seen instant karma hit someone? I was at a crowded airport when a guy in a suit started screaming at a gate agent over a delay. He was being incredibly abusive, eventually throwing his latte at her desk and yelling, "Do you have any idea who I am? I could have you fired in 10 minutes. Suddenly, a woman in a pilot's uniform walked up. She didn't say a word. She just grabbed his boarding pass, ripped it in half, and handed it back to him. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "I know exactly who you are. You're the guy who isn't getting on my plane. Security is right behind you." The entire terminal erupted in applause as he was led away in handcuffs. He didn't just miss his flight, he made the no-fly list before he even left the building. What is the most entitled thing you've seen a relative do after a death in the family? My grandfather was a simple man who lived in a small farmhouse. When he passed, my wealthy cousin Karen showed up to the funeral in a designer dress, acting like she was the main character. Before the service even started, she was in the farmhouse with a roll of sold stickers. She was sticking them on everything: the vintage record player, the handmade quilts, and even my grandmother's wedding ring. She told me, "I'm the only one with a house big enough to display these properly. You should be thanking me for taking the clutter." The look on her face when the lawyer arrived for the will reading was priceless. My grandfather had actually left the entire estate to a local cat sanctuary. Karen didn't just lose the furniture, she was served an immediate notice to vacate for trespassing. She tried to sue the sanctuary, but the judge literally laughed her out of court. I still visit the farmhouse, and the cats are currently sleeping on her vintage record player.